The engagement ring hit the coffee shop table with a sharp clink that seemed to echo through my entire world. Emma's hands were shaking as she pushed it toward me, her brown eyes refusing to meet mine. I can't do this anymore, Alex. I'm sorry. Before we parted ways, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. 3 years of my life, condensed into a single moment of devastation. The campus coffee house around us buzzed with the usual chatter of University of Portland students, but all I could hear was the deafening silence between us. Emma Rodriguez, the woman I'd planned to marry in 6 months, was looking at me like I was a stranger. Is there someone else? The words tumbled out before I could stop them, though part of me already knew the answer from the guilt written across her face. Emma's voice came out barely above a whisper. Dr. Harrison understands my work in ways that you never could. She finally looked up, and I saw something I'd never seen before in her eyes. Pity. He's helping me with my thesis on contemporary feminist literature. We connect on an intellectual level that's just different. Dr. Michael Harrison. I knew exactly who she meant. The distinguished English literature professor, with his salt and pepper beard and expensive blazers. The one Emma had mentioned countless times over dinner, always with a little too much enthusiasm. The one who'd been mentoring her for the past 8 months. How long? I asked, surprised by how steady my voice sounded when everything inside me was crumbling. It started as just coffee meetings about my research, Emma said, twisting her hands in her lap. Over the past 3 months, it became something more. Alex, I tried to fight it, but he sees the real me, the intellectual me, the version of myself I'm becoming through my graduate studies. The version I apparently wasn't good enough for. I stared at the ring between us, remembering how I'd saved 4 months to buy it. Working overtime at TechFlow Solutions to afford something worthy of the woman I loved, the woman who was now telling me I wasn't intellectually stimulating enough for her evolved sensibilities. So that's it? I picked up the ring, its weight feeling both familiar and foreign in my palm. 3 years, and you're throwing it all away for your professor? Emma's face hardened slightly. Don't make this sound so simple, Alex. You've been so focused on your coding projects and your video games. When was the last time we had a real conversation about literature or philosophy or anything meaningful? When was the last time you even asked about my thesis? The accusation hit me like a physical blow because there was truth in it. I'd been buried in work lately, trying to develop an app that could secure our financial future, I'd thought. I was building something for us, but apparently I'd been building a wall between us instead. I was working toward our future, I said weakly. Your future, Emma corrected. You never asked what I wanted. You just assumed I'd be happy playing house while you coded away in your little tech bubble. Michael listens to me, challenges. Me. He makes me think. The way she said his name, Michael, not Dr. Harrison, made my stomach turn. There was an intimacy there that belonged to me, or at least I'd thought it did. Emma stood up, gathering her bag and coat, moving. In with him next week. I'll come by the apartment this weekend to get my things when you're not there. I think it's better if we don't see each other for a while. I watched her walk away, her long dark hair catching the afternoon light streaming through the coffee. Shop windows. 3 years of shared memories, inside jokes and dreams for the future, walked out that door with her. I sat there for another hour, turning the engagement ring over and over in my hands, trying to process what had just happened. The drive back to our apartment in the Pearl District felt like moving through thick fog. Everything looked the same, but nothing felt real. The parking spot where Emma's little Honda usually sat was empty, a preview of the emptiness waiting for me upstairs. Our apartment, my apartment now, I supposed, felt like a museum of a relationship that had just died. Still scattered across the coffee table, her favorite mug still sat in the sink, and her Northwestern sweatshirt was draped over the back of the couch. Evidence of a life we'd built together, now reduced to items she'd pack into boxes and take away. I called in sick to work the next day, something I'd never done since starting at TechFlow Solutions 3 years ago. Jake Thompson, my best friend, and roommate during college, drove over from his graphic design studio as soon as I texted him what had happened. I can't believe she did this, Jake said, pacing around the living room while I sat motionless on the couch. I mean, I knew she'd been acting weird lately, but I never thought she'd actually leave you for some pretentious professor. She said I wasn't intellectual enough, I said, staring at the ceiling, that we didn't connect on a deep level anymore. Jake stopped pacing and turned to face me. Alex, you built a recommendation algorithm that's being used by 3 major streaming services. You speak 3 programming languages fluently and you're working on a 4th. You're not exactly a caveman. But I'm not literary, I said. Don't read poetry or discuss feminist theory over wine. I fix problems with code, not metaphors. Since when is that a bad thing? Jake grabbed 2 beers from the refrigerator and handed me one. Emma knew who you were when she said yes to your proposal. If she wanted to marry a professor, she should have found one from the beginning instead of wasting 3 years of your life. The next few days passed in a blur of numbness and sporadic anger. Emma kept her word and came by on Saturday, while I was deliberately away helping Jake move some equipment for his studio. When I returned, half the apartment was empty. Her books, her plants, her art prints, her clothes, all gone, leaving behind geometric patterns of dust and unfaded paint where her belongings used to be. She'd left a note on the kitchen counter, written in her careful handwriting on a piece of her personal stationery. I hope someday you'll understand that this isn't about you not being good enough. It's about me discovering who I'm meant to be. I hope you find someone who appreciates the person you are. Please don't hate me. Emma I crumpled up the note and threw it in the trash, then immediately retrieved it and smoothed it out again. Even her goodbye felt literary and composed, like something she might have workshopped in one of her writing classes. Work became my refuge. I threw myself into coding with an intensity that impressed even my demanding boss at TechFlow Solutions, the app I'd been developing. A platform that helped small businesses optimize their customer service workflows suddenly consumed every waking hour. Why, if Emma wanted intellectual stimulation from her professor, I'd find my validation in clean code. And efficient algorithms? My colleague Sarah Mitchell started staying late to work on the user interface design for the app, and we fell into a comfortable rhythm of collaboration. Sarah was different from Emma in every way practical where Emma was theoretical, direct where Emma was nuanced, satisfied with meaningful work rather than constantly seeking deeper purpose. She brought me coffee without being asked and never made me feel like my interests were somehow lesser than hers. You know you're allowed to go home sometimes, Sarah said one evening as we worked past 9 o'clock again. The app will still be here tomorrow. Home is kind of depressing right now, I admitted, not looking up from my screen. Sarah saved her work and turned to face me. Jake told me what happened with Emma. I'm sorry. It really sucks. It's probably for the best, I said, trying to sound like I meant it. If she could just walk away like that, we probably weren't as solid as I thought. Still, Sarah said gently, 3 years is a long time. It's okay to be hurt. I appreciated that she didn't try to give me advice or tell me I was better off without Emma. She just acknowledged the pain and let it exist without trying to fix it. 2 weeks after the breakup, I ran into Emma's mother, Rosa Rodriguez, at Powell's Books in the Pearl District. I'd been browsing the computer science section, looking for anything that might help me level up my development skills, when I spotted her familiar silver-streaked hair in the philosophy aisle. Rosa had always been kind to me during the 3 years I'd dated Emma. She worked as a nurse at OHSU for 30 years before retiring, and she had a way of listening that made you feel like the most important person in the world. Emma often complained that her mother was too traditional, was too focused on family and stability instead of personal achievement and intellectual growth. Alex Rosa's face lit up when she saw me, but then immediately clouded with concern. Mijo, how are you doing? I'm okay, Mrs. Rodriguez, I said, though we both knew it wasn't true. Rosa studied my face with the sharp assessment of someone who'd spent decades reading patients' conditions at a glance. You look thin. Are you eating? Sarah brings me lunch sometimes, I said, then immediately regretted mentioning another woman's name. Good, Rosa said firmly. But you need more than workplace kindness right now. She closed the book sheet, been holding something about ancient wisdom traditions, and looked at me seriously. Walk with me, Alex. Let's talk. We wandered through the bookstore's labyrinthian sections, while Rosa asked gentle questions about how I was handling everything. She didn't pry or make me relive the painful details, but somehow I found myself telling her about the loneliness, the confusion, and the nagging feeling that maybe Emma had been right about our fundamental incompatibility. "Emma called me last week," Rosa said as we reached the cafe section of the bookstore. "She wanted me to know about her new living situation. Before I heard it from someone else, I tensed. Not sure I wanted to hear what Emma had told her mother about Dr. Harrison. She seemed very excited about her intellectual connection with this professor," Rosa continued carefully. "She talked a lot about how stimulating their conversations are, how much she's learning about herself through their relationship. That's great for her," I said, trying to keep the bitterness out of my voice. Rosa stopped walking and turned to face me. "Alex, can I tell you something my grandmother used to say?" I nodded, curious despite my pain. "She used to say that when you're very hungry, even stale bread tastes like a feast. But once your hunger is satisfied, you realize it was never really about the bread at all." I frowned, not sure what she meant. Rosa smiled gently. "Emma has been hungry for something. Recognition, challenge, a sense of her own intelligence, being valued. This professor is feeding that hunger, but it doesn't mean he's offering anything real or lasting. Sometimes we mistake intensity for depth, especially when we're young and still figuring out who we are. But maybe she's right." I said maybe we just weren't compatible. Maybe I wasn't enough for her. "Or maybe," Rosa said quietly, "she wasn't enough for you." The words hit me like a revelation. I'd been so focused on what I lacked in Emma's eyes that I'd never considered what she might have lacked in mine. The constant criticism disguised as suggestions for improvement. The way she'd started looking down on my interests as somehow inferior to hers. The growing sense that nothing I did was quite sophisticated enough for her evolving tastes. "Think about it," Rosa continued. "In 3 years, did Emma ever show genuine interest in your work? Did she ever ask you to explain coding to her, or express curiosity about the problems you were solving?" I thought back through our relationship, and the answer was uncomfortably clear. Emma had tolerated my career but never engaged with it. She'd roll her eyes when I got excited about a breakthrough in my code, change the subject when I tried to share something interesting I'd learned at work, and generally treat my passion for technology as a quirky phase I'd eventually outgrow. "But her work was important," I said weakly. "Literature, education, that stuff matters more than apps and algorithms." Rosa raised an eyebrow. "Says who?" "Alex, you create tools that help people work better, communicate more effectively, solve problems in their daily lives. How is that less valuable than analyzing century-old novels?" We found a table in the bookstore cafe, and Rosa ordered us both tea. Earl Grey for her, green tea for me. She remembered my preference from all the family dinners I'd attended over the years. "My grandmother had another saying," Rosa said, stirring honey into her tea. "She said that a woman who truly loves a man will try to understand his world. And a man who truly loves a woman will do the same. When someone stops trying to understand your world, they've already left the relationship, even if their body is still there." The observation was so accurate it made my chest tight. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Emma had stopped asking about my day months ago, stopped showing interest in my projects, stopped making an effort to connect with the things that mattered to me. I'd been so busy trying to bridge the gap between us that I hadn't noticed she'd stopped building from her side. But what if she's right about me not being intellectual enough? I asked. What if I'm just a tech worker who plays video games and watches Marvel movies? What if that's not enough for someone who wants deeper meaning in their life? Rosa leaned forward, her dark eyes intense. Alex, let me ask you something. When you're solving a complex coding problem, what goes through your mind? I thought about it. Well, I have to understand the user's needs, figure out what they're really trying to accomplish, then design an elegant solution that's both functional and intuitive. I need to anticipate problems they might not even know they'll have and build. In safeguards, it's like architectural thinking, but for digital spaces. And when you play those video games Emma used to complain about, I'm usually drawn to strategy games or puzzle games, I said. I like figuring out complex systems, optimizing resource management, thinking several moves ahead. Rosa smiled. And those Marvel movies? I mean, they're fun, but I also appreciate the storytelling craft, I said, warming to the topic. The way they built an interconnected universe over dozens of films, how they balance multiple character arcs, the visual effects innovation. So you're analytical, strategic, creative, and you appreciate complex narrative structures, Rosa summarized. But because you apply these qualities to technology instead of dusty books, you think you're not intellectual? Put that way, it sounded ridiculous. Emma has always been insecure about her intelligence, Rosa continued. She was a good student, but she had to work hard for her grades while her brother Tyler seemed to absorb information effortlessly. She's spent years trying to prove that she belongs in academic circles. She's smart enough, sophisticated enough, worthy enough. This professor represents everything she thinks she needs to be to prove her worth. But she is smart, I protested. She got into graduate school. She's doing well in her program. Of course she's smart, Rosa agreed. But she's been so focused on proving it to other people that she's lost sight of what actually matters. She's chasing validation instead of building something real. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, sipping our tea and watching other customers browse. The towering bookshelves around us. I felt something loosening in my chest, like a knot I hadn't realized was there slowly beginning to unravel. Mrs. Rodriguez, I said finally, why are you telling me all this? I mean, Emma is your daughter. Shouldn't you be supporting her choices? Rosa's expression grew sad. I love my daughter, Alex, but love doesn't mean pretending someone's mistakes are victories. Emma is making a choice based on fear and insecurity, not love or genuine compatibility. She's going to get hurt, and she's going to hurt this professor, too. Once the novelty wears off and she realizes what she's given up, you think she regret it? I think she already does, but she's too proud to admit it, Rosa said. The Emma who fell in love with you 3 years ago knew a good man when she found one. The Emma who left you is so tangled up in trying to become someone else that she can't see clearly anymore. Rosa reached across the table and covered my hand with hers. But that's not your problem to solve, mijo. Your job now is to figure out who you are and what you want, independent of Emma's opinion or anyone else's. You spent 3 years trying to be good enough for someone who had convinced herself you weren't. What would happen if you spent the same energy becoming the person you actually want to be? The question lingered in my mind long after Rosa and I parted ways that afternoon. I walked through the Pearl District streets, past the trendy galleries and upscale restaurants Emma had always loved, and felt something shifting inside me. For the first time since the breakup, I wasn't thinking about what I'd lost or what I'd done wrong. I was thinking about what I might do next. That conversation with Rosa became a turning point I didn't recognize at the time. I went home to my half-empty apartment and looked around with different eyes. Instead of seeing the absence of Emma's things, I started seeing space for new possibilities. Instead of dwelling on her criticism of my interests and career, I began remembering why I'd chosen them in the first place. I'd fallen in love with coding in college not because it was easy or lucrative, but because it felt like magic. Taking abstract problems and building concrete solutions, creating tools that could genuinely improve people's lives, there was poetry in that process, even if Emma had never been able to see it. That weekend, instead of moping around the apartment or drowning my sorrows at Jake's favorite bar, I decided to do something I hadn't done in months. I worked on a personal project, not the customer service app for work, but something purely for the joy of creation. I'd always been fascinated by the idea of helping elderly people stay connected with their families through technology. My own grandmother had struggled with smartphones and computers. I'd seen how isolation affected many older adults who couldn't keep up with rapidly changing technology interfaces. I spent Saturday and Sunday designing a simplified communication platform specifically for seniors. Large buttons, intuitive navigation, automatic family photo updates, easy video calling with relatives. It wasn't groundbreaking or revolutionary, just thoughtful and human-centered. As I worked, I felt more like myself than I had in months. Sarah stopped by Sunday evening, ostensibly to drop off some design files for Monday's meeting, but really, to check on me. She found me deep in code, surrounded by empty coffee cups and scattered notebooks. "This looks different from the work app," she said, looking over my shoulder at the interface I was building. "It's just a personal project," I said, suddenly self-conscious. Something for older users who get overwhelmed by traditional social media. Sarah studied the screen more carefully. "Alex, this is brilliant. Look how clean and intuitive this is. Your grandmother would actually be able to use this, wouldn't she?" I nodded. That's the whole point. Technology should serve people, not confuse them. "Can I play around with the interface design?" Sarah asked. "I have some ideas for making the visual hierarchy even clearer." We ended up working together until nearly midnight, Sarah sketching improved layouts while I refined the underlying functionality. It felt natural and collaborative in a way that work with Emma had never been. Sarah asked thoughtful questions about the technical challenges, offered creative solutions to design problems. It genuinely seemed excited about the project's potential. "You know," Sarah said as we finally called it a night, "this could actually be something bigger than a weekend project. There's a real market for senior-friendly technology." "Maybe," I said, but internally I was already imagining possibilities. What if this little passion project could grow into something meaningful? What if I could build a business around making technology accessible to people who'd been left behind by the rapid pace of innovation? The following week at TechFlow Solutions, I approached my boss about potentially developing the senior communication platform as a company initiative. To my surprise, he was immediately interested. The aging population represented a massive underserved market, and TechFlow had been looking for ways to diversify beyond business software. "Take Sarah and run with this," he said. "Give me a detailed proposal by the end of the month. If the numbers work, we might have our next major product." Working on the senior platform with Sarah felt completely different from any professional collaboration I'd experienced before. She understood both the technical possibilities and the human needs we were trying to address. When I explained complex back-end architecture, she listened thoughtfully and asked questions that helped me clarify my own thinking. When she proposed design solutions, I could see immediately how they'd improve the user experience. More importantly, Sarah seemed genuinely excited about the impact we could have. She talked about her own grandparents' struggles with technology, shared stories about elderly neighbors who felt cut off from their families, and brought a sense of mission to the work that went far beyond career advancement. "You know what I love about this project," Sarah said one evening as we tested the video. "Calling feature with deliberately poor lighting to simulate real-world conditions. It's not trying to change how people think or force them to adapt to technology. It's adapting technology to serve people as they are." The comment reminded me of something Rosa had said during our conversation at Powell's, that genuine love meant trying to understand someone's world rather than demanding they reshape themselves to fit yours. Emma had spent 3 years subtly suggesting I should become more literary, more academic, more like the person she thought I should be. Sarah, by contrast, seemed to appreciate the person I actually was. I was careful not to read too much into our growing partnership. Sarah was a colleague and friend, nothing more. I was still processing the end of my relationship with Emma, still figuring out who I was as a single person after 3 years of coupledom. But I couldn't deny that working with Sarah felt easy and natural in a way that the final months with Emma never had. 3 weeks after my conversation with Rosa, I ran into Tyler Garcia, Emma's younger brother, at a coffee shop near the university. Tyler was a senior at University of Portland, majoring in computer science, and he'd always been friendlier to me than the rest of Emma's family. Tyler looked genuinely happy to see me, then immediately awkward as he remembered the situation. "Hey man, how are you holding up?" "I'm doing better than I expected," I said, and realized it was true. "How's school going?" "Good, actually. I'm working on my senior capstone project, building a machine learning algorithm that can detect early signs of academic plagiarism. It's pretty complex stuff." We chatted about his project for a few minutes, and I found myself offering suggestions and asking detailed questions about his approach. Tyler's face lit up as we dug into the technical challenges, and I remembered why I'd always enjoyed talking with him. Unlike Emma, Tyler never made me feel like my interests were somehow inferior. 2 more traditional academic pursuits. "You know, Tyler said as our conversation wound down. Emma always said you weren't intellectual enough for her, but I never understood that. You ask better questions about my computer science work than most of my professors do. The casual comment hit me harder than it should have. She talked about that with you. Tyler looked uncomfortable. She complained sometimes that you two didn't have deep conversations, but honestly, Alex, Emma defines deep pretty narrowly. If it's not literature or philosophy or art history, she doesn't really consider it worth discussing. Been that way. But those things are important, I said. Sure, Tyler agreed. But so is the stuff you do. I mean, the algorithms you write probably affect more people's daily lives than most of the novels Emma studies. It's just a different kind of importance. Tyler's perspective, combined with Rosa's earlier insights, was slowly helping me see my relationship with Emma from a completely different angle. I'd spent 3 years accepting her implicit hierarchy of interests, where literature and academia occupied the peak while technology and practical problem-solving ranked somewhere near the bottom. But what if that hierarchy was arbitrary? What if Emma's values weren't more sophisticated than mine, just different? Can I ask you something? Tyler said, lowering his voice. Do you think Emma's happy? With the professor situation, I mean? I don't know, I said honestly. Why? She seems intense lately, more intense than usual. She calls my mom every day talking about her research and this guy, but it doesn't sound like happiness. It sounds like she's trying to convince herself of something. I thought about Rosa's observation that Emma was chasing validation rather than building something real. Maybe she's just excited about her academic work. Tyler shook his head. I've seen Emma excited about school before. This is different. She's working all the time, staying up until 3 a.m., reading and writing, barely eating. My mom's worried about her. The conversation with Tyler stayed with me as I continued developing the senior communication platform.
Emma was struggling.
But her struggles weren't my responsibility anymore. I had my own life to build, my own path to discover. Sarah and I submitted our proposal for the senior platform project at the end of the month, complete with market research, development timelines, and financial projections. My boss was impressed enough to greenlight a full development cycle, with Sarah and me as the lead team. This could be huge, Sarah said, as we celebrated with drinks at a Pearl District restaurant. If we can really crack the senior market, we could help millions of people stay connected with their families. And make TechFlow a lot of money, I added. That too, Sarah laughed. But honestly, the money feels secondary. I keep thinking about my grandmother sitting alone in her apartment because she can't figure out how to video chat with us. We can solve that problem for her and people like her. I watched Sarah's face as she talked about the project's potential impact and felt something warm settle in my chest. This was what passion looked like when it was grounded in genuine care for other people rather than personal validation. This was what intellectual excitement felt like when it wasn't competing with anyone else or trying to prove anything. 4. The first time since Emma had pushed that engagement ring across the coffee shop table, I felt genuinely excited about the future. Not because I was over Emma or ready to jump into another relationship, but because I was remembering who I was underneath all the self-doubt and accommodation I'd built up over 3 years of trying to be good enough for someone who had decided I wasn't. The work with Sarah, the insights from Rosa, the new perspective on my own interests and abilities, it all felt like pieces of a puzzle finally clicking into place. I wasn't the same Alex who'd sat stunned in that coffee shop a month ago. I was becoming someone new, someone who understood his own worth, independent of anyone else's opinion. And that transformation, I was beginning to realize, was just the beginning. The senior communication platform launched 3 months later to unexpected success. Within the first week, we had over 5,000 downloads, and the user feedback was overwhelmingly positive. Elderly users were finally able to stay connected with their grandchildren without feeling frustrated or confused by complicated interfaces. Adult children could share photos and updates with their aging parents without having to provide constant tech support. Sarah and I found ourselves working closely together as the project grew beyond our initial expectations. Major tech blogs started writing about our revolutionary approach to inclusive design, and we were invited to speak at conferences about bridging the digital divide for seniors. The recognition felt surreal after years of Emma dismissing my work as just coding. "Look at this," Sarah said one morning, showing me her laptop screen. "The Washington Post wants to do a feature story about the platform. They're calling it the app that's reuniting families across America." I read over the email, still not quite believing our small project had garnered national attention. "Want to interview us both? Next week if we're available?" Sarah grinned. "Are you ready to be famous, Mr. Chen?" The interview went better than I'd expected. The journalist was genuinely interested in our design, philosophy, and the technical challenges of creating intuitive interfaces for users who hadn't grown up with smartphones. She asked thoughtful questions about accessibility, digital inclusion, and the social impact of technology that made me articulate ideas I'd never fully expressed before. "What inspired you to focus on senior users specifically?" the journalist asked. "I kept thinking about my grandmother," I said. "She passed away 2 years ago, but in her final months, she felt so isolated because she couldn't keep up with how quickly technology was changing. Family members would try to teach her to use FaceTime or Facebook, but the interfaces were designed for people who intuitively understood digital conventions. She needed something built specifically for her generation's needs and comfort level." Sarah added, "We realized there was this huge population of people who wanted to stay connected but were being left behind. By the assumption that everyone should just adapt to whatever interface designers create, we flipped that assumption and asked, what if we adapt the technology to serve the users instead?" The journalist nodded enthusiastically. "And Alex, I understand you developed this platform while going through a significant personal transition." I glanced at Sarah, unsure how much personal detail to share. I'd recently ended a long-term relationship, and I was reevaluating what I wanted my work to mean. This project helped me remember why I fell in love with programming in the first place: the ability to solve real problems for real people. After the interview, Sarah and I walked along the Willamette River waterfront, decompressing from the media attention. The spring air was crisp, and the cherry trees were beginning to bloom along the pedestrian path. "You handled that really well," Sarah said. "I was nervous about the personal questions, but you found a way to be honest without oversharing." "I've been thinking a lot lately about the difference between privacy and shame," I said. "For months after Emma left, I felt like the breakup was this embarrassing failure I needed to hide. But now I'm starting to see it as just part of my story, not the defining part, but not something to be ashamed of either." Sarah stopped walking and turned to face me. "Can I ask you something? Do you still think about her? Emma, I mean?" The question was direct in a way that surprised me, but I appreciated Sarah's straightforwardness, less than I used to. "When I do think about her, it's more like remembering a phase of my life that taught me important things, rather than missing what we had." "What kinds of things did it teach you?" I considered the question as we resumed walking, that I'd rather be valued for who I am than constantly trying to prove I'm worthy of someone else's love. That intellectual compatibility means finding someone who's curious about your mind, not someone who shares identical interests. I don't want to spend my energy trying to convince someone I'm good enough. I want to spend it building something meaningful with someone who already sees my worth. Sarah smiled. "Those are pretty valuable lessons. What about you?" I asked. "Any relationship wisdom you've picked up along the way?" "I learned that I'm attracted to people who are passionate about their work but not obsessed with proving themselves to everyone else," Sarah said. "Someone who can get excited about solving problems and creating things without needing constant external validation that they're smart or important or successful." There was something in the way she said it that made me wonder if she was talking about me specifically, but I didn't want to assume or make the conversation awkward. We'd developed such a good working relationship and friendship that I was reluctant to complicate it with romantic speculation. The Washington Post article came out 2 weeks later and brought even more attention to our platform, Backflow Solutions. CEO decided to spin off the senior-focused technology into its own division, with Sarah and me as co-directors. Suddenly, we had our own budget, our own team, the freedom to develop additional products for underserved user populations. "Can't believe this is happening," Sarah said, as we toured our new office space in the Alberta Arts District. 6 months ago, this was just your weekend passion project." 6 months ago, I was a different person," I said. "I don't think I would have had the confidence to pursue this if I hadn't gone through everything with Emma." Sarah looked at me. Curiously? Really? You seem like you've always been confident about your abilities? Emma had a way of making me feel like my interests weren't sophisticated enough, I admitted. She never said it directly, but there were constant subtle suggestions that I should be reading more literature, thinking more deeply about art and philosophy, becoming more like the intellectuals she admired. I started doubting whether solving practical problems through technology was as valuable as analyzing the deeper meanings of human experience. That sounds exhausting, Sarah said. I spent so much energy trying to become someone I thought she'd respect more that I lost sight of what I actually loved about my work. The irony is that she left me for being too focused on career advancement, but I was only so career-focused, because I was trying to prove I was worthy of her. Sarah shook her head. You know what I think? I think she was intimidated by your natural talent and tried to undermine your confidence so you wouldn't realize you were settling for someone who didn't appreciate you. The observation was so sharp and unexpected that it stopped me in my tracks. You think Emma was intimidated by me? Think about it, Sarah said. You're genuinely gifted at something that's increasingly valuable in the world. You solve complex problems intuitively, you understand user needs almost instinctively, and you create tools that actually improve people's lives. Meanwhile, she's struggling through graduate school, competing with dozens of other students for attention from professors. Analyzing texts that have been analyzed thousands of times before. Of course she felt threatened, never considered the possibility that Emma's criticism came from insecurity rather than legitimate intellectual superiority. But she's smart. She got into a competitive graduate program. She writes well. She knows so much about literature. Being smart and being secure in your intelligence are two different things, Sarah said. Really confident people don't need to diminish their partner's achievements to feel good about themselves. They celebrate them. That evening, I called Rosa Rodriguez. We'd been meeting for coffee every few weeks since our initial conversation at Powell's, and she'd become an unexpected source of wisdom and perspective during my post-SEMA transformation. Rosa, can I ask you something about Emma? I said after we'd caught up on the usual topics. Of course, mijo. Did she ever seem intimidated by other people's success? And was she always competitive about intelligence and achievement? Rosa was quiet for a moment. Emma has always been her own harshest critic. When she was young, she would get so upset if Tyler got better grades than her, even though they had completely different strengths. She seemed to believe that there was only so much recognition to go around, and if someone else was succeeding, it meant less for her. Sarah thinks Emma might have been threatened by my career success. Sarah sounds like a perceptive woman, Rosa said. Emma called me last week, actually. She wanted to know if I'd seen the article about your app in the newspaper. My stomach tightened. What did she say? She said she was proud of you for pursuing something meaningful, but there was something in her voice. Like she was trying to convince herself of something. She asked several times if you'd mentioned her during the interview. I didn't. I just said I'd ended a long-term relationship and was reevaluating my priorities. I think that might have bothered her more than if you'd said something negative, Rosa said gently. Emma expected you to be bitter or to struggle without her. The fact that you've thrived and moved on so completely challenges her narrative about the relationship. What narrative? That she outgrew you? That she was held back by being with someone who wasn't intellectually stimulating enough? You're succeeding beyond anything you achieved while you were together. It suggests the problem wasn't your limitations. It was the dynamic between you. Rosa's insight felt like the final piece of a puzzle I'd been working on for months. Emma hadn't left me because I wasn't good enough for her. She'd left because staying with me would have forced her to confront her own insecurities about not being as naturally talented or successful as she wanted to be. How is she doing? I asked, realizing I genuinely wanted to know. She's struggling, Rosa said honestly. This thing with the professor isn't working out the way she expected. He's married for one thing, separated from his wife, but not divorced, and the power dynamic is complicated. She's realizing that being someone's graduate student mistress isn't the sophisticated romance she imagined. I felt a pang of sympathy for Emma, but it was distant and detached. The way you might feel bad for a character in a movie, rather than someone whose pain directly affects you. She's also having trouble with her thesis, Rosa continued. The professor keeps changing his expectations, and she's worried she won't finish on time. I think she's starting to realize that mixing academic mentorship with romantic involvement was a mistake. I'm sorry she's having a hard time, I said, and meant it. Are you? Rosa asked gently. Really? I thought about it. Yeah, I am. I don't want Emma to be miserable. I want her to figure out what actually makes her happy and build a life around that. I just don't want to be part of that process anymore. It's very mature of you, Alex. I had a good teacher, I said, making Rosa laugh. Our senior communication platform continued to grow over the following months. We expanded beyond the initial family connection app to include simplified banking interfaces, telemedicine portals, and digital literacy tutorials. The success felt validating in a way that was completely different from the external validation I'd craved during my relationship with Emma. This recognition came from solving real problems for people who genuinely needed help. Users sent us heartfelt emails about reconnecting with distant grandchildren. Elderly couples shared photos of themselves using our video calling feature. And adult children thanked us for creating tools that gave them peace of mind about their aging parents. Sarah and I made a good team in ways that went beyond our professional collaboration. She challenged my ideas without undermining my confidence, offered creative solutions I wouldn't have considered on my own, and brought out qualities in me that I'd forgotten I possessed. Working with her felt effortless and energizing rather than draining and competitive. We should celebrate, Sarah said one Friday evening as we wrapped up a particularly productive week. The banking interface just passed all its accessibility tests, and we're ahead of schedule on the telemedicine portal. What did you have in mind? There's a new restaurant in the Pearl District that's supposed to be amazing. Want to check it out? I agreed, and we made reservations for the following evening. As I got ready for dinner, I realized this would be the first time Sarah and I had gone out together outside of work events or casual coffee meetings. It felt significant in a way that made me slightly nervous. The restaurant was intimate and warmly lit, with exposed brick walls and an open kitchen where we could watch the chefs work. Sarah had chosen well. The atmosphere was sophisticated. Without being pretentious, exactly the kind of place I would have picked myself. This is nice, I said as we settled into our table. I'm glad you like it. I wasn't sure if you preferred casual or upscale for celebratory dinners. Honestly, I'm still figuring out what I prefer for a lot of things, I admitted. I spent so many years adapting my preferences to Emma's that I'm rediscovering my own tastes. Sarah raised her wine glass. To rediscovering your own tastes. We clinked glasses, and I felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the alcohol. Can I tell you something I've been thinking about? Sarah said as we waited for our appetizers. Of course. I think you're one of the most naturally creative people I've ever worked with, but you don't seem to see it in yourself. I was surprised by the observation. I don't really think of myself as creative, more of a logical, systematic problem solver. What? That's exactly what creativity is in our field, Sarah said. You're seeing problems from angles that other people miss. You intuitively understand what users need before they can articulate it themselves. You design elegant solutions that feel obvious in retrospect, but weren't obvious to anyone else beforehand. It's not just technical skill, it's genuine creative insight. Emma always made me feel like creativity was something that happened in art studios and literature classes, not at computer screens. Emma was wrong about a lot of things, Sarah said firmly. Yes. But especially about that. For why by we're creating new ways for people to connect, to learn, to solve problems, to experience the world. How is that less creative than writing another analysis of a Victorian novel? The comparison reminded me of something Rosa had said months earlier about different kinds of intelligence and value. I was starting to understand that Emma's hierarchy of importance, with literature and traditional academics at the top, and practical technological work somewhere near the bottom, was arbitrary and self-serving rather than objective truth.
Ow.
You know what I realized recently? I said. I spent 3 years trying to become someone Emma would find more interesting. But I never asked whether Emma was interesting enough for me. Sarah leaned forward, intrigued. What do you mean? When was the last time Emma surprised me with an unexpected insight, or introduced me to an idea I'd never considered, or showed me a new way of looking at something? When was the last time she asked me a question that made me think differently about my own work or interests? Sarah was quiet, letting me work through the thought. She was so focused on proving her own intellectual sophistication that she never engaged with mine. I continued. She treated our conversations like performances where she could demonstrate her knowledge rather than exchanges where we both might learn something new. That sounds lonely, Sarah said. I didn't realize how lonely until I started working with you and remembering what it felt like to have someone actually curious about my ideas. Sarah's cheeks colored slightly, but she maintained eye contact. I am curious about your ideas. I think you have a fascinating mind. The comment hung in the air between us, loaded with possibility. I felt something shift in the dynamic of our relationship, an acknowledgement that we'd moved beyond professional collaboration into something more personal. Sarah, I said carefully, I need to be honest about something. I'm attracted to you, and I think we could have something really good together. But I also value our working relationship and our friendship too much to mess it up by misreading signals or moving too fast. Sarah smiled. I appreciate your honesty, and for what it's worth, I'm attracted to you too. I have been for months, actually, really. But I was never sure if you were ready for something new, or if you'd be interested in someone so different from Emma. Different from Emma is exactly what I want, I said. I want someone who sees my work as valuable, who's curious about how I think, who builds me up instead of subtly tearing me down. I want someone who's secure enough in herself that she doesn't need to compete with me or diminish my achievements, to feel good about her own. I want those things too, Sarah said. And I want someone who appreciates what I bring to the table without trying to change me into someone else. We weren't rushing into anything, but we were acknowledging the potential for our relationship to evolve beyond friendship and professional partnership. Walking back to our cars, Sarah took my hand. The gesture was simple and natural, but it felt momentous after months of careful professional boundaries. Thank you for tonight, she said as we reached her car. Thank you for taking a chance on celebrating with me. Thank you for being honest about your feelings. That took courage. I squeezed her hand. I learned from someone recently that I'd rather be valued for who I am than spend energy trying to convince someone I'm worthy of their attention. Sarah stood on her toes and kissed me softly. It was different from kissing Emma, less desperate, less fraught with unspoken tensions and unmet needs. It felt like the beginning of something healthy and balanced rather than the culmination of months of uncertainty. I'll see you Monday, Sarah said, getting into her car. See you Monday. I drove home feeling lighter than I had in years. Future felt full of possibility in a way that had nothing to do with proving myself to anyone else and everything to do with building something meaningful with someone who already saw my worth. My phone buzzed with a text message as I pulled into my parking space. It was from Tyler Garcia. Hey Alex, saw the article about your app in the Post. Really impressive stuff. Emma saw it too. Just thought you should know. I read the message, twice waiting for the familiar pang of anxiety or curiosity about Emma's reaction. But all I felt was a mild interest. The way you might wonder about the weather in a city you used to live in but no longer call home. Texted back, thanks man. Hope school's going well for you? That was all. No questions about Emma. No fishing for information about her current situation. No emotional investment in her opinion of my success. She had become part of my past rather than a shadow hanging over my present. Inside my apartment, I looked around at the space I'd created for myself over the past several months. Gone were the echoes of shared decorating decisions, and compromised aesthetic choices. Instead, the apartment reflected my own tastes and interests: clean lines, natural materials, comfortable furniture that prioritized function over fashion, bookshelves filled with technical manuals and biographies of innovators, rather than literary classics I'd never enjoyed. This was what my life looked like when I stopped trying to be someone else's version of an ideal partner. This was what success felt like when it was grounded in solving real problems rather than seeking external validation. This was what the beginning of love felt like when it was based on mutual appreciation rather than desperate accommodation. I made myself a cup of tea and settled onto the couch with my laptop, not to work, but to research weekend hiking trails around Portland. Sarah had mentioned wanting to explore more of Oregon's outdoor offerings, and I found myself excited about sharing one of my longtime interests with someone who might actually enjoy it, rather than tolerate it. The transformation Rosa had begun with her wisdom at Powell's books was finally complete. I wasn't the same person who'd sat stunned in that campus coffee shop while Emma pushed an engagement ring across the table. I wasn't even the same person who'd spent months after the breakup wondering what was wrong with me or how I could have been good enough to keep her. I was someone who understood his own worth, pursued work that mattered to him, and was ready to build something real with someone who appreciated the person he actually was rather than the person he might become with enough effort and accommodation. Emma had left me for her professor's intellectual sophistication, but in losing her, I'd found something far more valuable myself, and the possibility of love that didn't require me to diminish who I was to make someone else feel better about who they were. The irony wasn't lost on me that Emma's mother had been the one to guide me toward this realization. Rosa had seen what her own daughter couldn't, that the problem with our relationship wasn't my inadequacy, but Emma's inability to appreciate what was already in front of her. Tomorrow, I would take Sarah hiking, and we would talk about our hopes for the senior technology platform, and maybe we would hold hands on the trail and plan our next celebration dinner. The future stretched ahead of me, full of possibilities I was finally ready to embrace. The hiking trail wound through dense Pacific Northwest forest, towering Douglas firs, creating a cathedral-like canopy above us. Sarah moved with surprising da-da-da-da-da-day grace over the rocky terrain, her enthusiasm infectious as she stopped frequently to photograph wildflowers and interesting rock formations. "I can't believe I've lived in Portland for 2 years and never done this," she said, pausing to catch her breath at a scenic overlook. The city sprawled below us, the Willamette River snaking through neighborhoods like a silver ribbon. "Most people think of Portland as just coffee shops and food trucks," I said, joining her at the viewpoint. "They don't realize how much wilderness is within an hour's drive." "Is this what you used to do on weekends before? Were trailed?" Off, not wanting to bring up Emma directly. "Sometimes, though usually alone." Emma wasn't much for outdoor activities. She preferred museum exhibitions and wine tastings. Sarah adjusted her backpack straps and gave me a thoughtful look. "Can I ask you something without it sounding like I'm fishing for information about your ex? Shoot. Did you two have any shared interests? I mean, genuine things you both enjoyed doing together?" I considered the question as we resumed hiking. We both liked trying new restaurants. We both enjoyed traveling, though we had different ideas about what made a good trip. Emma wanted cultural immersion and historical sites, preferred places where we could be active outdoors and explore natural settings, so you compromised. A lot. I thought that's what relationships were supposed to be about. Finding middle ground, accommodating each other's preferences. Sarah stopped walking and turned to face me.
"Alex,
Accommodation is important in relationships, but it should go both ways. It sounds like you did most of the adjusting." Observation stung because it was accurate. I'd tried Thai restaurants because Emma loved them, attended poetry readings that bored me senseless, and spent vacations in European cities wandering through art museums when I would have preferred hiking through national parks. But when had Emma ever tried coding tutorials because I found them fascinating? When had she ever suggested we spend a weekend camping or exploring the Columbia River Gorge? "I think I confuse love with flexibility," I admitted. I thought being a good partner meant being willing to reshape myself to fit what she wanted. "That's not love," Sarah said firmly. "That's people-pleasing." Love is when someone appreciates who you are and wants to understand the things that matter to you, even if they're not naturally drawn to those things themselves. We reached a small waterfall about an hour into the hike, and Sarah immediately pulled out her phone to capture the cascading water. I watched her work, noting how she experimented with different angles and lighting to get the shot she wanted. There was something appealing about her focused attention to detail, her willingness to take time to do things well. "You're good at that," I said as she showed me the photos. "I took some photography classes in college. It's just a hobby now. But I love how you can capture a moment and preserve the feeling of being somewhere." Emma always said photography was superficial compared to written descriptions of places. She thought images were too immediate, that they didn't require enough interpretation or analysis. Sarah looked at me with something approaching disbelief. "She criticized your interests a lot, didn't she?" "I don't think she meant it as criticism. She just had strong opinions about what kinds of activities and interests were intellectually valuable." "Alex, listen to yourself. You're still defending her. Someone who loved you wouldn't have made you feel like your natural interests were somehow inferior." The truth of Sarah's words hit me like cold water. I had been defending Emma, automatically explaining away her behavior even months after our relationship ended. Why was I still protecting someone who had consistently made me feel inadequate? "You're right," I said. "I think I got so used to justifying her attitude that I kept doing it even after she left. It's a hard habit to break. When someone chips away at your confidence for years, you internalize their voice." We found a flat rock near the waterfall and unpacked the lunch we'd brought. Sarah had put together sandwiches and trail mix, along with a thermos of coffee that was still hot despite the morning's hike. "This is perfect," I said, settling beside her on the sun-warmed stone. "I'm glad you like it." I wasn't sure what kind of food you preferred for hiking. He asked what I liked and then made exactly that. "It's not complicated." Sarah laughed. "Revolutionary concept, right? Actually considering your preferences instead of assuming you'll adapt to mine." As we ate, Sarah shared stories from her childhood, recalling how her parents often took her and her siblings camping. They grew up hiking and backpacking across the Pacific Northwest, and she spoke of those trips with deep affection. I couldn't help but feel a little envious of the strong, supportive family bond she described. "My parents always believed nature was the best teacher," Sarah said. "They wanted us to learn how to solve problems, be independent, and care about the environment. Some of my favorite memories come from those trips." "Now, that sounds incredible," I replied. "In my family, the focus was always on academics and preparing for a career. Outdoor adventures were seen more as a rare treat than anything truly formative." "What about Emma's family? Did they encourage her academically?" she asked. I thought back to what Rosa had told me about Emma's tense dynamic with her brother Tyler. Her mom supported her, but Emma always felt she had to prove herself. She believed she needed to excel intellectually to earn recognition. "That makes sense," Sarah said. "People who feel secure in themselves don't need to put others down to feel validated." Rosa made a similar point. She once said Emma confused intensity with depth and was constantly searching for validation. Rosa sounds like a smart woman. She is. Honestly, she helped me make sense of my relationship with Emma more clearly than I ever could during the 3 years we were together. Sarah stretched out on a rock, using her backpack as a pillow. "Funny how people outside of a situation can often see the patterns we miss." "What do you mean?" I asked. "Like Jake. He'd probably noticed early on that you were bending too much to make that relationship work. I saw it within a few weeks of working with you. But when you're in love, it's easy to overlook the red flags and convince yourself the issues are just temporary." I lay beside her, gazing up at the trees. "I still don't know how I lost myself in trying to be everything Emma wanted. It's a slow process," she said, and one little compromise after another, staying quiet to avoid conflict, hiding parts of yourself that don't align with what they expect. Over time, you realize you're not even living your own life anymore. "Is that what happened in your last relationship?" She paused before answering. "In a way, yes. I dated someone for about a year who was very focused on appearances and status. He wanted me to dress a certain way, hang out with his friends, and essentially become a polished version of myself to match his image." "That sounds exhausting." It was. I began second-guessing my choices, everything from my clothes to my career. He'd offer advice that seemed helpful, but was really about controlling how I presented myself. So what made you see it wasn't healthy? My sister noticed. She pointed out that I'd stopped talking about the things I used to love, projects at work, books, travel plans.
All my energy went into his world and his plans.
I looked over at her, realizing just how similar our experiences were. That's exactly what happened with Emma. I stopped sharing the parts of myself she didn't care about. I gave up interests she thought were silly and avoided conversations she wasn't into. The scariest part is how normal that starts to feel. You tell yourself you're being mature or supportive when really you're just fading away. We made our way back down the trail, chatting easily. For the first time in ages, I wasn't thinking about work or checking my phone. Being with Sarah felt so natural and nothing like the careful effort it took to keep things smooth with Emma. "Thanks for today," I said as we loaded our gear into the car. "I forgot how much I love hiking." "Let's do it more often," she smiled. "I've already looked up other trails. You want to do this again?" "Alex, I want to do a lot of things with you: hiking, traveling, trying new food, staying in to cook, working on things we care about. I want to build something meaningful with someone who doesn't ask me to hide who I am." Her honesty was both exciting and a little overwhelming. After years of uncertainty with Emma, Sarah's clarity felt almost too good to be real. "I want that too," I said. "But I should be honest. I'm still learning how to be in a relationship where I don't constantly worry about whether I'm enough." "We'll figure it out together," she said, squeezing my hand. "That's what real partnerships do." As we neared Portland, I felt a peace I hadn't known in years. The day had gone exactly the way I wanted, with someone who genuinely liked the same things without needing to compromise or apologize for my choices. Then my phone buzzed. It was a message from Rosa. "Mijo, I hope it's okay, but Emma asked for your number. She wants to talk. I told her I'd check with you first." I showed the message to Sarah. She read it silently. "What do you think?" I asked. "I think the decision's yours," she replied. "But ask yourself what you're hoping to get out of that
Conversation.
If anything she says would really change how you feel about your life now." As we pulled into her driveway, I reflected. 6 months ago, I would have been full of anxiety, wondering what Emma wanted, desperate to seem okay without her. Now, I just felt mildly curious, like wondering how a TV series you stopped watching might have ended. "I think I might talk to her," I said. "Not because I miss her or want to get back together, but because I'm curious, and honestly, I think I'm finally at a point where her opinion doesn't define me anymore." "That sounds like a healthy place to be," Sarah said. "Just trust your gut, and don't feel like you have to fix anything for her." "When did you become so wise?" "About relationships, mostly by messing up and learning from it, just like everyone else." I walked her to the door and she invited me in for dinner. Her home was small, warmly decorated, full of personal touches that reflected exactly who she was. Unlike the carefully curated aesthetic Emma had insisted on for our apartment, Sarah's space felt lived in and comfortable. "I love your place," I said, looking around the living room. "It feels like you. Thank you." I wanted somewhere that felt like home rather than a magazine spread. We cooked dinner together, and I was struck by how naturally we worked as a team. Sarah chopped vegetables while I prepared the protein. We shared cooking utensil tasks without negotiating who should do what, and we talked icily about everything from work projects to childhood memories. "This feels right," I said as we sat down to eat. "What does this us?" "The way we communicate and collaborate and just exist together. It's not work the way my relationship with Emma was work." "Good relationships shouldn't require constant effort to maintain basic compatibility," Sarah said. "They should enhance who you already are, not require you to become someone different." After dinner, we settled on Sarah's couch with wine and continued talking about our hopes for the senior technology platform, our individual career goals, and the activities we wanted to share as our relationship developed. The conversation flowed naturally from topic to topic, with neither of us feeling pressure to impress the other or prove our worth. "I should probably head home," I said around 10 o'clock, though I was reluctant to leave. You don't have to, Sarah said. I mean, you're welcome to stay if you want. No pressure, just I enjoy your company. I stayed, and we fell asleep on the couch watching a documentary about innovative architecture. When I woke up the next morning with Sarah curled against my side, I felt a peace that had been absent from my life for years. This was what it felt like to be with someone who valued me as I was. This was what it meant to build something together based on mutual respect and genuine compatibility rather than force and accommodation. This was the life I could have if I stopped trying to convince the wrong person I was worthy of love and, instead, opened myself to someone who already saw my worth. I carefully extracted myself from the couch and made coffee, bringing Sarah a cup when she woke up an hour later. Good morning, she said, stretching and smiling at me with sleepy contentment. Good morning. I made coffee. You're perfect, she said, and I could tell she meant it in the casual, affectionate way, rather than the desperate, clinging way Emma used to use such words. Far from perfect, I said. But apparently good enough for you. More than good enough, Sarah corrected. You're exactly what I want. The simple statement filled me with more satisfaction than all of Emma's complex analyses of our relationship, compatibility ever had. Sometimes the best things in life were also the most straightforward. Emma's call came on a Tuesday evening while I was reviewing user feedback for our latest platform update. I'd given Rosa permission to share my number, but I hadn't expected Emma to reach out so quickly. When her name appeared on my phone screen, I felt a momentary flutter of the old anxiety before realizing it had already passed. Hello, Emma, I said, keeping my voice neutral. Alex.
Ow!
Her voice sounded strained, different from the confident tone I remembered. Thank you for agreeing to talk to me. I wasn't sure you would. What's going on? There was a long pause. I saw the article about your app in the Washington Post. I wanted to congratulate you. It's exactly the kind of meaningful work you always talked about wanting to do. The compliment felt hollow, delivered with the careful precision of someone following a script. Thank you. The platform has been more successful than we expected. We, my business partner and I, Sarah Mitchell. She's the head of user experience design. Another pause, I see. That's great, Alex. You deserve to work with people who appreciate your talents. The comment was loaded with implications I didn't want to explore. Is there something specific you wanted to discuss, Emma? Actually, yes. Her voice became smaller, more vulnerable. I'm in a difficult situation, and I was hoping we could meet in person to talk about it. I know I have no right to ask for your help, but I don't have anyone else I can turn to. Every instinct I'd developed over 3 years of our relationship kicked in, urging me to immediately offer assistance, to ask what was wrong, to schedule a meeting as soon as possible. But something had fundamentally changed in me over the past several months. Instead of reactive concern, I felt curious detachment. What kind of situation? It's complicated. The thing with Michael didn't work out the way I expected. There were consequences I didn't anticipate, and now I'm not sure what to do next. Dr. Harrison, of course. I wondered briefly what those consequences might be, but realized I didn't particularly want to know the details. Emma, I'm sorry you're going through a difficult time, but I'm not sure how I can help. We haven't spoken in almost a year, and we're both in very different places now. I know, she said quickly. I know I hurt you terribly, and I know I have no right to expect anything from you. But Alex, you were always so good at seeing solutions to complex problems. You were always so steady and reliable when everything else felt chaotic. The description of my supposed virtues rang strangely after years of being told I wasn't intellectually stimulating enough, wasn't sophisticated enough, wasn't worthy of her evolved sensibilities. Now, suddenly, my practical problem-solving abilities were valuable again. Emma, whatever you're dealing with, I'm sure you can handle it. You're intelligent and capable. You don't need me to solve your problems. But I do, she said, and I could hear tears in her voice. I've made such a mess of everything. My thesis advisor won't work with me anymore because of the personal complications. I'm behind on my research. Might not graduate on schedule. And Michael, he's decided to try to reconcile with his wife. There it was. The professor had tired of his graduate student affair and chosen to return to his marriage, leaving Emma academically and romantically stranded. I felt a distant sympathy for her situation, but no urge to rescue her from the consequences of her own choices. I'm sorry that's happening, I said. But Emma, these are problems you'll need to work out with your academic advisor and your graduate committee. I can't help you with your thesis or your timeline for graduation. I'm not asking you to help with that, she said quickly. I need someone to talk to. Someone who knew me before all of this happened. Someone who understood the person I used to be. The request was simultaneously reasonable and completely inappropriate. Emma wanted emotional support and perspective from the man she'd left for another man, a relationship she'd discarded for a more intellectually stimulating alternative. She wanted me to provide comfort and stability while she dealt with the fallout from choosing excitement over security. Emma, I don't think that's a good idea. You have friends, family, probably a counseling center at the university. Those are better resources for working through whatever you're experiencing. None of them know me the way you did, she said. None of them understood what we had together. What we had together ended when you decided I wasn't enough for you, I said quietly. You can't selectively resurrect the supportive parts of our relationship while ignoring the reasons you chose to leave. The directness of my response seemed to surprise her. Alex, you sound so different. So, cold. I'm not cold. I'm just clear about boundaries now. I wish you well, Emma, but I'm not available to be your emotional support system while you sort out your life. Is it because of her? This Sarah person? The question revealed more about Emma's mindset than she probably intended. Even in crisis, she was thinking competitively, assuming my unwillingness to help her must be about another woman rather than about my own growth and changed priorities. This has nothing to do with Sarah. It has to do with me learning to value myself enough, not to get pulled back into dynamics that weren't healthy for either of us. Dynamics that weren't healthy? Emma's voice sharpened. Alex, we had 3 good years together. We were building a life. We just had some communication issues toward the end. Communication issues? I almost laughed at the euphemism. Emma, you told me I wasn't intellectually stimulating enough for you. You left me for your professor because he understood your work in ways I never could. Made it very clear that what we had wasn't sufficient for your needs. I was confused, she said. I got caught up in the excitement of academic recognition and made terrible decisions. But that doesn't mean what we had wasn't real. You're right. What we had was real. It was also limiting for both of us in ways I'm only now beginning to understand. There was silence on the other end of the line. When Emma spoke again, her voice was smaller and more desperate. Alex, I made a mistake. A huge, terrible mistake. I thought I wanted something different, but I was wrong. I want to come home. The words I'd longed to hear for months after our breakup now left me completely unmoved. Emma, I'm not your home anymore. I haven't been for almost a year, but we could try again. I understand now what I gave up. I understand what you meant to me. What I meant to you was stability and emotional support while you figured out what you actually wanted. Now that your other option didn't work out, you want to return to the safe choice. That's not love, Emma. That's convenience. That's not true, she protested. I loved you. I still love you. You loved the idea of me when it served your needs, but you never loved me enough to actually see me, to value what I brought to the relationship, to build something that honored both of our strengths instead of constantly suggesting I should become more like the kind of person you thought you deserved. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. Hope your day's going well. Excited for dinner tomorrow. The simple message, with its easy affection and forward-looking optimism, crystallized the difference between my past and present. Sarah was excited about our future together. Emma was panicking about her present circumstances and looking backward for a solution. Alex, please, Emma continued. Can we at least meet for coffee? One conversation face to face? I need to explain what happened, and I need you to understand how sorry I am. Emma, I understand that you're sorry. I understand that your choice didn't work out the way you hoped. But I'm not the person you left behind anymore. You're not the person I used to be willing to accommodate at the expense of my own self-respect. Self-respect? Her tone became defensive. What is that supposed to mean? It means I spent 3 years trying to convince you I was worthy of your love instead of asking whether you were worthy of mine. It means I accommodated your preferences, supported your goals, and adapted myself to your vision of who I should be. While you never showed the same consideration for my interests or aspirations, I supported your career, Emma said weakly. You tolerated my career. You never showed genuine interest in my work, never asked meaningful questions about my projects, never celebrated my achievements unless they reflected well on you. Supporting someone means engaging with what matters to them, not just not actively undermining it. The conversation was becoming more heated than I'd intended, and I realized I was falling into an old pattern of trying to make Emma understand my perspective. But her understanding was no longer necessary for my peace of mind. Look, I said, softening my tone, I hope you figure out your academic situation. I hope you find a way to finish your thesis and graduate on schedule. I hope you eventually find someone who appreciates the same things you do and builds the kind of intellectual partnership you were looking for. But I'm not that person, and I'm not available to help you work through this transition. So that's it? Emma's voice was thick with tears. 3 years together, and you won't even meet me for one conversation? Emma, we had that conversation in the campus coffee shop when you returned my engagement ring. You explained very clearly why our relationship wasn't working for you, and I accepted your decision. I'm not interested in relitigating those conclusions. Now that your alternative didn't work out, I was wrong, she said desperately. I was stupid and selfish and wrong about everything. Maybe you were. But being wrong about one choice doesn't automatically make the previous choice right. We weren't compatible in the ways that matter for a lasting partnership. Nothing that's happened since changes that fundamental reality. After I hung up, I sat in my apartment for a long time processing the conversation. 2 years ago even? 1 year ago, Emma's call would have sent me into emotional turmoil. I would have analyzed every word, wondered if I was being too harsh, questioned whether I owed her more compassion given our shared history. Now I felt mainly relief that the conversation was over and curiosity about what had taken me so long. To see our relationship clearly. Emma's description of me as steady and reliable, her praise for my problem-solving abilities, her sudden appreciation for qualities she'd previously taken for granted. None of it moved me because I no longer needed her validation to know my own worth. I texted Sarah, Emma called tonight. Long story, but it reinforced how grateful I am for what we're building together. She replied immediately, Are you okay? Want to talk about it? I'm good. Really good, actually. Looking forward to dinner. Tomorrow? Me too. I'm proud of you for handling whatever that was with such clarity. Sarah's response was perfect, supportive, without being intrusive. Confident in our relationship without being possessive, proud of my growth without needing details about my past. This was what emotional maturity looked like in a partnership. I realized that Emma's call had been a gift, not because it offered any possibility of reconciliation, but because it confirmed how completely I'd moved beyond the person I used to be. The Alex who had dated Emma would have been flattered by her sudden appreciation for his qualities, would have felt obligated to provide support during her crisis, would have questioned whether he was being too cold or unforgiving. The Alex I'd become understood that compassion didn't require self-sacrifice. Loving someone in the past didn't create permanent obligations in the present, and that the highest form of respect for both of us was honest acknowledgement that we'd been wrong for each other from the beginning. Ma's professor had been a symptom, not the cause, of our incompatibility. If it hadn't been Dr. Harrison, it would have been someone else eventually. Because Emma had been looking for an exit from our relationship long before she found a specific alternative. She'd been dissatisfied with who I was and hoping I'd become someone different, while I've been trying desperately to transform myself into her ideal partner. Now, I was with someone who liked me exactly as I was, who found my natural interests fascinating rather than inadequate, who wanted to build something new together rather than fix what was supposedly wrong with me. The contrast was so stark it was almost funny. I went to bed that night feeling lighter than I had in months, knowing that the final ghost of my relationship with Emma had been laid to rest. Not through anger or resentment, but through the simple recognition that some chapters of life are meant to be closed completely before new ones can fully begin. 2 years later, I stood in the kitchen of the house Sarah and I had bought together in Southeast Portland. watching her demonstrate our latest product to her grandmother via video call. The elderly woman's face lit up as she successfully navigated the simplified interface we'd designed, effortlessly sharing photos of her garden with Sarah. "It's so easy, sweetheart," her grandmother said through the screen. "Even I can figure it out." "That was the whole point, Grandma," Sarah laughed, catching my eye and smiling. "Alex designed it specifically for people who want to stay connected without all the complicated technology getting in the way." Our senior communication company had grown beyond anything I'd imagined possible. We now employed 15 people, had partnerships with 3 major healthcare systems, and were launching an international version targeting elderly populations in rural communities. More importantly, we received daily messages from families who had reconnected across distances. From elderly individuals who no longer felt isolated, from adult children who had peace of mind about their aging parents. After Sarah ended the call with her grandmother, she found me preparing dinner in our kitchen. The space was warm and inviting, with plants on every windowsill and photos from our travels covering the refrigerator. It felt like home in a way my Pearl District apartment never had. "How was your meeting with the Portland City Council?" she asked, wrapping her arms around my waist from behind. "Better than expected. They want to pilot our digital literacy program in 5 community centers starting this fall." "That's amazing," Sarah said, turning me around to face her. "You realize we're going to need to hire more staff?" "I know. A good problem to have." Sarah studied my face with the familiar expression she got when she was reading my mood. "Seemed thoughtful today. Everything okay?" "I ran into Tyler Garcia at the coffee shop this morning," I said. "Emma's brother? He told me she finished her graduate degree and moved to Seattle for a teaching position. How do you feel about that?" I considered the question while I stirred the pasta sauce on the stove, relieved mostly. It's good that she figured out her academic situation and found a path forward. And I'm glad she's in a different city now. Is any part of you curious about how she's doing? Not really. Tyler said she seems focused on her career and is seeing someone new, another professor apparently. I hope it works out better for her this time. Sarah sat at our kitchen island, watching me cook. It's remarkable how completely you've let go of that relationship. I don't think I could be so philosophical about an ex who put me through what Emma put you through. I'm not being philosophical, I said. I'm just genuinely indifferent. Emma represents a version of myself I don't miss, someone who is constantly trying to prove his worth to someone who couldn't see it. I can't be angry at her for not appreciating what I had to offer when I didn't appreciate it myself back then. The timer went off for the bread in the oven, and Sarah got up to check it. We moved around the kitchen with the easy coordination of 2 people who had learned each other's rhythms and preferences. This kind of domestic partnership was something I'd never experienced with Emma, who had always treated shared household tasks as negotiations rather than natural collaborations. "I got a call from that documentary filmmaker today," Sarah said as we sat down to eat. "She wants to follow up on our story for the sequel about innovative small businesses. Are you interested? Only if you are. I know you're not entirely comfortable with media attention." The consideration in her response was typical of how Sarah approached decisions that affected both of us. She never assumed her preferences should take precedence, never made unilateral choices about our shared life, never subtly pressured me to go along with things I wasn't enthusiastic about. "I think it could be good publicity for the digital literacy program," I said. "As long as they focus on the work rather than our personal story." That's what I told her. Our relationship isn't the interesting part. It's what we've built together that matters. After dinner, we walked through our neighborhood, stopping to chat with neighbors and admire the community garden several residents had started in a vacant lot. Portland felt different to me now than it had during my years with Emma. Instead of a city where I was trying to fit into someone else's vision of sophistication, it was simply home, a place where Sarah and I had built a life that reflected our shared values and individual interests. "I love this," Sarah said, gesturing at the garden beds where elderly community members were teaching children how to plant vegetables. "This is exactly the kind of intergenerational connection our platform is supposed to facilitate. Just happening organically in real life. Maybe we should sponsor some community gardens," I suggested. "Partner with neighborhood associations to create spaces where older and younger residents can share knowledge and skills. That's brilliant. Could pilot it here and then scale it to other cities where we're launching the platform." This was how most of our best ideas emerged, through casual conversations about things we cared about, building naturally on each other's insights and enthusiasm. Sarah never made me feel like my suggestions were inadequate or unsophisticated. Instead, she treated my ideas as valuable contributions to whatever we were building together. We stopped at our favorite bookstore on the way home, browsing separately before meeting in the coffee section to share our finds. Sarah had picked up a book about user experience design for accessibility, while I'd chosen a biography of an entrepreneur who had built a successful social impact company. We were interested in different aspects of our shared work, but both committed to learning and growing in ways that would benefit our partnership. "Want to read chapters to each other tonight?" Sarah asked as we walked home. Perfect, it was. A small ritual we'd developed, taking turns reading aloud from books that interested us, sharing knowledge and perspectives in a way that felt intimate, and intellectually stimulating without being competitive or performative. This was what genuine intellectual connection looked like: mutual curiosity, shared learning, and appreciation for each other's insights. Later that evening, as Sarah read to me about innovative approaches to inclusive design, I reflected on how much my life had changed since that devastating afternoon in the campus coffee shop. Emma's departure had felt like the end of my world, but it had actually been the beginning of my real life, the life where I was valued for who I actually was rather than tolerated despite my supposed shortcomings. Rosa had been right about hunger and stale bread. Emma had been starving for validation and intellectual recognition, so any professor who paid attention to her work had seemed like a feast. But once that hunger was satisfied, she'd realized the relationship wasn't actually nourishing her in the ways that mattered for long-term happiness. I, meanwhile, had been so grateful for any romantic attention that I'd mistaken accommodation for love, compromise for compatibility, and emotional exhaustion for the normal challenges of a committed relationship.
Learning to recognize the difference
Between working on a relationship and working to maintain your sense of self within a relationship, it's been the most valuable education of my adult life. Sarah finished the chapter she was reading and curled up beside me on our couch. "I love our life," she said simply. "Me too." "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if Emma hadn't left you for her professor?" I thought about the question seriously. I think we would have stayed together for a few more years, gotten married because it seemed like the logical next step, and then eventually divorced when we both realized we were trying to force something that was never going to work naturally. So you think she did you a favor by ending it when she did? I think she did us both a favor. I'm genuinely happier now than I ever was with her, and I hope she's found or will find someone who appreciates the things about her that I couldn't fully value. Sarah kissed my forehead. "You're a good man, Alex Chin." I'm a man who learned the difference between being good to someone and being good for someone. As we got ready for bed, I caught a glimpse of us in the bathroom mirror, brushing our teeth side by side, comfortable in our pajamas, planning tomorrow's work schedule around a hiking trip we'd been looking forward to all week. We looked like what we were, two people who had found each other at the right time in their lives, when they were ready to build something together, rather than trying to fix what was broken in themselves or each other. Emma had taught me what I didn't want in a relationship. Rosa had taught me to recognize my own worth. Sarah had taught me what love felt like when it was based on genuine compatibility and mutual respect rather than need and accommodation. The engagement ring I'd bought for Emma was still in my drawer, but it no longer represented failure or rejection. It represented a chapter of my life that had needed to end before the right chapter could begin. Soon I would replace it with a different ring, chosen for a different woman, and a different version of myself, one who knew the difference between settling and choosing, between being chosen by default and being chosen enthusiastically. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.